the Bay to you. New voices rising, old school groove. From pioneers of soul to the freshest moves. Turn the dial, tune in tonight. Baylor's got the feeling right. It's the sound of the city, let it flow. Catch the rhythm on Baylor Radio. Streaming live, feel the beat, come alive. On Baylor Radio, where the bass survives. Baylor Radio. From the Bay to you. New voices rising, old school groove. From pioneers of soul to the freshest moves. Turn the dial, tune in tonight. Baylor's got the feeling right. It's the sound of the city, let it flow. Catch the rhythm on Baylor Radio. Streaming live, feel the beat, come alive. On Baylor Radio, where the bass survives. Baylor Radio. Baylor Radio. Where the bass survives. Baylor Radio. Baylor Radio. Where the bass survives. Baylor Radio.
What's going on, y'all? It's Chewy Gomez out here with the Lava Mae folks. These folks are doing a great job and a great service to the community. For those folks out there that are homeless, and not even the homeless. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are using this that aren't homeless, right?
It's true, yeah. There's a lot of low-income folks or folks that are housed in places where maybe the showers don't work, or they're unsavory, or maybe they're not private, or not always hot. So we do serve primarily houseless folks on the street.
Now, folks taking a shower, they don't want to get back in their dirty clothes. Is there an option for them to get some clothes that all here? I don't know.
We do have clothing donations. You know, it's all donation based, so the stock fluctuates. But we do have a lot of volunteers or even community members that bring clothes out. So we typically do stock underwear and socks always. If you got goods.
Oh, nice. So if you guys got some socks, you guys care to donate, you got some extra shirts. You know, we all outgrow our shirts. I'm into a 3X now, so I got to donate my 2Xs. But yo, get down there and connect with lavamae.org and make your donations.
Welcome to Sweet Fingers, where the flavors of Jamaica come alive. Our talented chefs blend authentic Jamaican ingredients with a touch of love and passion. From tender oxtail stew to flavorful coconut shrimp to our snapper fish, we serve up the best of Jamaican cuisine. Whether you're looking for a taste of Jamaica or an unforgettable dining experience, Sweet Fingers is the place to be. Feel the rhythm, taste the spice, and immerse yourself in the vibrant Jamaican nightlife at our restaurant, where every night becomes a celebration of island flavors and unforgettable experiences. Come and experience the soulful flavors of Jamaica today. Nobody does it like Sweet Fingers, baby.
Are you ready to honor the legacy of my brother and hip-hop legend Shock G and make a difference in the community? Show your support for the East Oakland Collective, EOC, by purchasing the new Shock G Humpty t-shirt designed by Shamari Smith. It's available at beatsforhope.com. My brother Shock G was a multi-platinum hip-hop pioneer and producer who was deeply committed to helping the community, culture, and music of his time. His vision for helping humanity was honorable and has inspired people to come together and see to those that need important attention and love. By purchasing the new Shock G Humpty t-shirt, you are supporting the EOC, which helps provide essential services in East Oakland. Together we can make a difference as we honor Shock G's legacy and support our friends at the EOC. Get your Shock G Humpty t-shirt today.
What's up, y'all? How you doing? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Word on the Curb. My name's Nita B with The Village in Oakland. And, Aikwe wasn't here. Quick wasn't here last week, and I forgot to mention he's not here this week. He has rehearsal for a really big show that he's having this weekend. So he will be back with us next week, but I forgot to mention last week why he wasn't around. And Tracy, our other co-host who's been MIA, is supposed to be coming through today. So I'm sending energy out to her to get her over here. Tracy, where are you? But we have a special guest again today, Ms. Andrea Henson. She is a civil rights attorney and the executive director of Where Do We Go, which started off in Berkeley by unhoused folks who basically were standing up and asserting that they were human beings and they had rights as human beings to be treated with dignity and respect and not criminalized and not treated like trash. And she took the helm of that organization and has been helping unhoused folks file lawsuits, particularly in the city of Berkeley and in parts of Oakland. When the village filed a lawsuit for the encampment that we started up in Eads and Elmhurst, she jumped on board. She wasn't an attorney yet. She and I were in the same program. So California and Virginia are the only two states in the entire United States where you can become an attorney without going to law school. You basically register for this program where you have to apprentice under an attorney for 4 years, and then the first year you take the baby bar, the second year you take the baby bar, the third year you just study, and then the fourth year you take the full bar, and then you go before the board. And she and I were enrolled in that program the same time, and just being in the same circles is how we met. And she jumped on board our legal team when we filed a lawsuit against the city of Oakland. And neither of us were attorneys at that time. I only got a year under my belt because I have too much on my plate. But the sister, she kept forward and kept going, and she's a full-fledged lawyer now, and she is committed to representing folks who get misrepresented and underrepresented and deleted in our society, the disposable folks. And so she'll be joining us later on today talking about, this is going to be a legal conversation today. We're going to be talking about the law and some bad laws that need to be broken. I'm a firm believer that bad laws need to be broken. But while we wait for her to get here, we're gonna jump into a film made by a journalist, Jessica Prado, who actually was a member of the Village's Cardboard and Concrete Collective. We have an artist collective of all unhoused artists. There are some talented people out there living on the streets that you wouldn't even know if you weren't paying attention. And she was a grad student at UC Berkeley and was unhoused while she was going to school. And she did a lot of film work and also does a lot of journalism work. In fact, one of the encampments that got bulldozed by the city, West Grand, between Martin Luther King between West Grand and 26, she was there documenting it as a journalist, and she got arrested for documenting, for just being a journalist. And that's kind of the level that Oakland is at right now, where if you show up to support somebody or to film what the city's doing, they will come for you. And but this is a film that we're going to watch, a short film she made during the quarantine. And it's kind of really profound because it really makes you kind of realize what life is like being unhoused, and just how during COVID, just that became even that much more harder. And I don't know, the kind of thing I take away from it is just the basic things that a lot of us take for granted become things you have to plan for, whether that's water or getting electricity or finding food and cooking food. So we're gonna watch that film by her and have a little conversation, and then hopefully Tracy and Andrea will be here to join us. But DJ Igor, you want to play that film? It's called Quarantine Diary.
You wake up in the morning to the usual sounds: chatter, honking, and the rubber tires speeding away down the street. But coronavirus times had made the streets quieter, less crowded, more peaceful. And every morning, there's a friendly face to greet. Good morning, Jake.
Hey, good morning, you. How you doing?
You're doing good. You want some oatmeal?
Yeah, sounds good.
I keep my cooking simple. No refrigerator or working stove limits their choices, so I make galera oatmeal. I feel blessed to have food every day. Nothing in this life is ever granted, and the virus has only made it more clear. These days, like many people in quarantine, I work from home. Except for me, my vehicle is my home. In 2014, I moved to the Bay Area. As a grad student, I worked the night shift at Whole Foods in San Francisco before deciding to quit the job, the rent, and the long commute, and buy an RV to live in. This is the first place I can call my own, but there are challenges: lack of space, plumbing, and amenities, no political support, uncertainty. After the shelter-in-place order began in March, finding resources has become harder. But at the same time, new volunteers are coming out.
I'm doing good, thank you.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Ready inside or here?
I can put them inside.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
While many people living on the streets must fend for themselves, I live in a community with other people living full-time in their vehicles.
Well, you enjoy. You said ham and cheese for them? Or? Here, I'll give you 2 fried eggs. And ham and cheese if you choose it fine. So fried egg and ham and cheese. Hey Lucian, are you home?
We are very lucky to have each other. Working from home during quarantine
Upload video.
is a challenge.
Wow. 32 hours. This is obviously not gonna work. I have to find some light.
I once relied on libraries, coffee shops, and grocery store lunches as my office space to work, but the pandemic has closed all public seating. There's nowhere to go.
So I am connected. So from 32 hours, it went down to 22 minutes. I can work with that.
It's dinner time, and tonight, I'm making pizza. It's time to go look for some power. In my RV, I can charge the basics, but I don't have enough power for kitchen appliances.
Looks good. Nice.
Protests have erupted across the country after the death of George Floyd, asking for change and justice. I also want justice for society to do right for all of our people.
Hey, Jake.
Hey, you awesome lady.
Welcome home. Want some pizza?
Of course I do. I'm hungry.
Yay. The battery's dead, but it still got battery. Sweet.
On the evenings, I take care of my chores to remain hidden as I'm breaking the rules. No illegal dumping. No trespassing. But to stay clean, to stay alive, breaking those rules is inevitable. At times, doing chores takes a couple of trips. They would take much longer if I was always on the move. For now, I'm lucky to be stationed. After coronavirus closed all the gyms, every night, I come and get my hot water behind the grocery store. At times, it's a hit and miss. The receiving dock will either be too busy, and coronavirus has had grocery workers working longer hours, restocking goods overnight. And as more businesses open back up in the area, it's only a matter of time before we're forced to leave and search for a new place to start all over again.
What's that? Okay. Okay, thank you. Right.
That's our way of life. Finding other ways around it. Finding ways to stay connected and together. And every day, I can fall asleep in peace. It's a gift.
That was Jessica Prado's movie Quarantine Diary. Come on up. And just in time, here's Andre Henderson. Henson. Have you ever seen Jessica's Quarantine Diary film
Is that the one where when she's living in her RV
during
and-
COVID?
Yes, it's
Yes.
fantastic.
We just showed it.
Oh my gosh, I
Yes.
love that movie.
Yeah, it really highlighted for me just the stuff that we take for granted when we were housed, and how like just water, cooking, bathing,
That's right.
watering your plants, like
Yes.
become a mission.
Yes, she was out at night gathering,
Yeah.
getting water, right?
Yeah.
that was such a good movie.
Yes, it was
She's
really
a
well
great
done.
filmmaker, journalist, and it was terrible that even she was arrested during the sweep,
Yes.
right, on West Grand.
Yes.
Yeah.
For just documenting what the city was doing, what they weren't supposed to be doing.
That's right.
Which is why she got arrested.
That's right. That's right.
they don't like to be caught red-handed, literally. But one of the things with her movie, her film, had me thinking too of just she's living, and many of us, and many folks right now have been living off the grid, and not necessarily by choice, but like in middle America and elite America, there's been this movement to live off the grid. Like it's a trendy thing to like be zen and give up your mansion and live in a box and be super minimalist, right? And it's like, it's really weird because when the rich people do it, it's a trend, it's a fad. And then when poor people are forced to do it, it's criminalized.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
Oh, absolutely. And Bolinas and Stenson Beach and Marin.
Right.
A lot of people take great pride in living off the grid and having a compost toilet and turning a school bus into housing. And it's interesting, too, because a lot of the workers, they'll say, oh, well, they're living off the grid when, in fact, they're homeless. It's coded language to say, oh, they're just choosing to be there. They're choosing to be poor. When that's not actually the case. If you really look at who's doing the work in the houses, who's painting the houses, who are the handymans, who's cleaning, who are cleaning, and it's typically homeless folks.
Yeah, for real. Who are very skilled. Very skilled.
Yes.
And so just it had me thinking too about like how, we've been talking for a long time, as a society, as a culture, about like here in the Bay at least too, about the big one, the big earthquake coming and this apocalyptic, weather change that we're having, and these forest fires, these wildfires, like all these things are happening, these waves, these tsunamis. And it's a trip because, look what happened down in LA. Look what happened up in Paradise. Look what happened in Santa Rosa, where in a blink of an eye, people are forced to live off the grid. And that, like, in these times and what's, coming up for us in the future, that the way unhoused people have figured out to survive kind of makes them the experts of, like, living through the apocalypse. It's just that folks are now experiencing, like, a racial and financial apocalypse.
That's right.
Right, that was manufactured by 24 here, at least here, by 24 years of policies and budget decisions and legislation, not by like Mother Nature deciding she's going to flood everything. Right.
Yep, I think we're going to see a lot more, not only with the natural disasters that we're seeing across the state of California, across the country, but if we do just look at California and we look at the natural disasters, in addition to our current administration, and how many people are getting laid off, not only in the federal government, but in the city of Oakland and other jurisdictions.
Yeah.
We are seeing a massive amount of folks who are not going to be able to pay rent.
Yeah.
In addition to those things, what we're seeing is a trend where landlords, especially in the Bay Area, you miss paying rent for 1 month, and they will go into court and file an unlawful detainer against you to get you evicted. And why is that? Because normally you need to miss a couple of months. That landlord wants to hold on to that tenant, but because they can raise the rent $400, they're kicking people out.
Or double the rent.
Exactly.
Right.
They're
By a
able
couple
to
of
do
thousand.
that. Yeah, they're able to do that.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing, like you said, a financial, racial, a socioeconomic apocalypse happening right now before our eyes. And that's why we're just seeing so many more people out on the streets.
Yeah. And it's a trip because, folks, the line that I just keep on hearing so much these days is just how homeless people are being blamed as the problem. And it's like, actually, they're the symptom. Like, homelessness is not the problem. The problem is greed. The problem is there's all these resources being hoarded by greedy people and by, politicians that have sold out the community. Homeless people are the victims of that, not the problem of it. And it's just a lot. We really need to shift our understanding about who's to blame with a lot of the problem, whether it's more crime, whether it's, more homelessness, whether it's the food now being so expensive, whatever it is, we're blaming the wrong people. Like I feel like with the food industry, people are blaming the workers for demanding that they get, $20 an hour. And it's like, that's not even living wage.
That's right. That's right.
And working the service industry sucks.
That's right.
It really is a terrible job to deal with people.
It's very hard right now because people are angry and they're projecting and they're blaming what they see. But like you said, it's a symptom of a much larger problem. And we're seeing it all over. I listened last night to the Fremont City Council. Did you hear it?
Yeah. In case folks don't know what's happening, do you want to share with folks what's going on in Fremont?
So Fremont
Crazy.
just passed an anti-camping ordinance, which they always call camping, but it's completely targeted to say anti-homeless.
Yes.
And so you cannot sleep not only on public property outside, but you can't sleep on private property. So this is new, where they have said that homeowners cannot have tents or people sleeping on their property. Now, they did add a caveat where they said you could have your friends sleeping on your property for 72 hours in a tent.
So crazy.
But that's it, right? And also you can't have camp paraphernalia. So you cannot have sleeping bags or tents. things like that, things that help you survive. In addition, they articulated that anyone who helps any individual in violating this anti-camping ordinance could be charged with an aiding and abetting charge.
Aiding and abetting.
So it would be a misdemeanor now to help unhoused folks survive.
Yes.
Now, what they tried to argue was that that doesn't apply to food or handing out water and things like that. And some council members said, well, then let's put that in the law. But ultimately, they did not do that. They said, we're after these vigilante people who help homeless individuals build structures.
And
We
give
wanna
them
go
tents.
After, yeah,
And give them
we're
tents.
going to go after those folks. But so in actuality, it passed last night. And
That's
so that
crazy.
means that anyone, and it's up to the
Right.
police. The police, it's so broad. So that means if you hand out water, if you give out tents, it could be legal assistance, right?
Right.
It could be social workers.
Right.
Anyone who's helping unhoused individuals survive. It could be, can I store your property for you? Because storing property is also a violation of this particular ordinance. It's very broad. But what was striking to me as I listened to the public come out and talk, that scapegoating, is that you had several folks say, the homeless are coming into our pools.
Wow.
They're coming into the dressing rooms, and that's very reminiscent
Reminiscent.
of what we heard in Jim Crow's. Like,
Hello.
do not come in the pools.
Right,
Right?
right.
I believe it was when Lena Horne was in a pool in Las Vegas, they drained it.
Yes.
Because it was just that appalling. And we're hearing that same kind of hate-filled language. And now that Fremont has taken this action, I don't doubt now that many other cities are
Yes.
going to feel emboldened to not only create these anti-camping ordinances that we're seeing throughout California. So many jurisdictions, Fresno have created, Sacramento are creating these new laws to stop individuals or to penalize them for being poor, for being unhoused, but also now to punish people who are helping individuals.
Yeah, that is wild. That is really wild. The act of kindness has now become a crime. You know,
Well, the Good Samaritan in the Bible would have been charged with the misdemeanor
Right.
and had to go to jail.
right? So
Yeah.
would Jesus.
So would Jesus. And
I mean,
it's also,
they
yeah,
executed him, but
it's gonna put it's and to think about too the chilling effect that this has, because if you're exposing yourself to a misdemeanor and you have priors, or for most groups that are marginalized and who have had very lethal experiences with law enforcement, are they going to want to volunteer?
Right.
Are they going to want to expose themselves to
Right.
that kind of liability?
right.
No. So we're going to see a complete change, I think, despite what they're saying. They're saying, no, we're here to protect the community. But
What's
go ahead.
go ahead?
No, I was just going to say, no one's going to disappear. That's what they want. They think everyone's just going to go away.
Yeah, that's not what's going to happen. What really is creepy about, I mean, the whole bill is creepy, but I think a piece that I've never really heard before is like defining what someone can do on their private property, in their private home.
That's right.
That is dangerous. That is like a huge precedent. Like people should be up in arms about that. That you can tell me what I can do in my property. You
That's
can tell me
right.
what I can do in my backyard.
That's
You
right.
can tell me who I can have in my backyard. And you can tell me how long my guests can stay.
That's right.
Like that's crazy.
That's right. That's right.
That's crazy.
That's right. It's completely, it's going above and beyond to selectively enforce, because we know who they're going after. And we see it all the time in our neighborhoods, because people, you have friends, you say, yeah, you could stay at my house. I mean, that's the whole part of taking care of your neighbor. It
Right.
takes a village.
Right.
And for them now to say that that's unlawful.
Right. To be a village is unlawful.
To be a village is unlawful. To tell your friend, bring your RV, park here in front of my house. And they said that. Well, we just don't want people parking their RVs. And it's interesting because what we see time and time again is not only friends parking in front of their friends' houses and family,
Yeah.
but now because the largest growing segment of the homeless population is seniors.
Seniors.
So many times they need a caregiver.
Right.
And the way that they're able to have a caregiver nearby is a family member. We see this time and time again.
Right.
A family member will park an RV or some sort of oversized vehicle so that they could be there to help their mom, their grandmother, some family member, and then the neighbors will say, we don't want that car there. And they'll actually bring a nuisance complaint or report them for some sort of code violation. And we're having to fight those more and more when it's a caregiver who's actually parked outside the house.
That's so crazy. It's so wild. And you know, like there was a grassroots organization called First They Came from the Homeless, that came out of Frisco and then moved into Berkeley, and they had that large Here There encampment by the Here There sign.
That's right.
On the Berkeley-Oakland border. But they chose that name because of what was happening in Nazi Germany. You know, all of us know about what happened to the Jews in Germany, but the Jews were the very last group that was targeted. The very first group that was targeted by the Nazis were the homeless. And then it was the Muslims, and then it was the invalids, and then it was the seniors, because the Nazis believed, or, you know, proclaimed that they didn't have any contribution to society anymore. And then it was the gypsies, and on and on and on and on. The gays, right? On and on and on. But the first group they came after were the unhoused. And just looking at where we're at right now in the U.S. with Nazis running this country, like literally Nazis, literal white supremacists, literal fascists running this country, and we have this huge backlash against the unhoused that's been brewing for the past couple of years. And now, because fascism runs the United States now, like it boldly, with like no illusion, these very harmful and aggressive laws that really are looking to disseminate homeless people, make homeless people disappear, dispose of homeless people are happening. And a lot of it is coming from what happened this past June with the Grants Pass verdict. We talked about that a little bit in prior episodes, but just to refresh people's memory, in 2018, there was the work of establishing that, or asserting that homeless people are humans and have also rights as citizens under the Constitution, has not really been a big body of work up until maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Prior to that, we were lucky here in the Bay Area to have a champion by the name of Osha Newman, who was doing this work for eons before it became something that was taken up 5 or 6 years ago. And shout out to Osha, because that's
Osha.
her mentor.
That's right. He's going to be the big 86 on Valentine's Day.
Amazing.
Yes, a happy birthday, Osha.
Yep. And then when I was trying to figure out how to sue the city, I'd be calling him at all hours like,
that's right.
I think I filled out the wrong paper. He's like, you did. Go over here and look for this paper. But in 2018, there was a landmark civil rights case called Martin versus Boise. And that in that case, the Supreme Court decided that unhoused people are protected by the Eighth Amendment, which is protection of cruel and unusual punishment. And what they asserted was that it is cruel and unusual punishment to evict someone from their tent, to take someone's vehicle they live in, if there's nowhere for them to go. And that upheld for many years up until this past June, when the Supreme Court, the Trump-appointed Supreme Court, Trump majorities appointed Supreme Court, overturned that decision. And in the Grant versus Johnson case. But here's the thing, is that the only thing that decision in June did was remove the Eighth Amendment protection. But it reasserted that cities still need to follow their policies. Yes. Shelters should still be offered to people. Everything, that the state should still follow its policies. But what happened was, across the country, cities across the country, states across the country had this knee-jerk reaction of like, now we can just arrest homeless people. And that's literally what happened. And with the legal work that we do with the village, with the legal work that Andrea does, it's been brutal. It's been absolutely brutal.
That's right.
How's it impacted your work? And what do you do? Let's talk. Can we watch a video first about you and your work? Can we watch that video?
What
at
video?
5:45.
Where
do we go?
Funny. You are too funny.
At 5:45, there's a word, because we just jumped right ahead into the conversation. Yep. So we're gonna watch that.
Oh my gosh.
I went digging for stuff.
Oh my gosh, look at us.
Some people in Berkeley are wondering tonight where they'll go next after Caltrans got the green light to clear their encampment near Interstate 80. KPX5's Andrea Nakano spoke with an attorney taking a stand for them by sleeping on the street.
Evictions started this year at homeless encampments along Highway 80 here. It has left a group scrambling to find a safe place to sleep at night.
It's not only physically exhausting, it's emotionally and mentally debilitating. You get worn down. It's hard to get up every day.
Sarah has been on the move after her homeless encampment was removed along Highway 80. She's tired and only wants one thing.
Just a place to live, you know?
She, along with about a dozen others, have found a block near the highway in Berkeley to call home for now, but claims she has been harassed by security guards from neighboring businesses. Andrea Henson, a civil rights attorney, heard about the harassment and decided to set up a tent next to her clients.
I'll put my tent up and you have me, and no one's going to come and talk to you that way, and we're going to find out who this is, and we're going to, I'll deal with it, and I'll defend you.
Henson has been working with this group since 2019 to help them find housing. While others were placed in congregate housing, Henson says these residents have special needs.
The folks who were left were the most disabled. So they couldn't go into congregate shelters because they had serious disabilities, mental disabilities, that prevented them from being around strangers.
Henson says her clients have spent years on waiting lists trying to navigate the system. Lawyers with the nonprofit Where Do We Go Berkeley, and specifically Henson, have given this group hope that they will soon have a roof over their heads.
She definitely gives us a lot of wind beneath our wings kind of thing.
I help them right where they are, and I'm very passionate as a civil rights attorney. I want to help those that no one will help.
In Berkeley, Andrea Nakano, KPIX 5.
Yes. So yes, tell us a bit about the work that you're doing, and how you got involved with specifically advocating for the rights of unhoused folks.
Well, I'll date myself. I used to, in undergrad at UC Riverside, I would go into the Santa Ana River bottom and visit homeless encampments and shanty towns. And I did one of my theses on that. It's changed a lot. Back then, you had groups of Vietnam vets who still wore their fatigues, and they would patrol the camps because that's what they were used to, but they couldn't go inside. And so through the years, when I got to the Bay Area, I met OSHA Newman because I was helping a guy on the street, and the police, I asked them, I said, who helps the folks that nobody helps? And they said, you should go work with OSHA Newman because he sued us a few times, but he's really passionate, and we've been inseparable ever since. He's been my mentor, and we've gone through Oakland. That's how I met you, Nita, and everybody out on the street. And so we founded Where Do We Go in 2019 when 4 of the largest encampments practiced civil disobedience and refused to move. We were in place for 2.5 years. Since that time, Where Do We Go has turned into a nonprofit, and I came on as executive director, which before I was always doing law work, but now I'm there. And since the Grants Pass ruling that overturned not only Martin v. Boise, but also Grants Pass, that either Grants Pass v. Johnson, I believe, or vice versa. What that has done, because previously jurisdictions had to provide housing or shelter before they could sweep an encampment.
Yep.
After Grants Pass, the court held that is no longer necessary. And of course, right away, jurisdictions in California started to aggressively sweep, especially those that submitted amicus briefs to the Supreme Court, like London Breed in San Francisco. Right away, she started to sweep folks in San Francisco. We heard about that. But also other cities like Fresno. You saw various cities throughout California start to create laws that made it a misdemeanor to camp outside. And so the sweeps increased. We saw that in Oakland. Now we have sweeps 7 days a week. Law enforcement is going out towing on the weekends. We didn't used to see that.
Right. Getting overtime for towing on the weekends.
So it really has increased now to where we are so busy. They're moving people so quickly they're sweeping folks sometimes twice in a day. So they'll take everything they have to survive. And I've seen this in Sacramento. And then they'll come back and sweep them again. So if they're even able to get a tent. And so, for example, this weekend, we're really seeing the perfect storm of things happening. One, in Sacramento, an abandoned building caught on fire because a homeless woman, man, and their dog were killed because it was so cold. And so what do people expect if in places like Fremont, places like San Luis Obispo, you can't have a sleeping bag? You can't have a tent. That's illegal.
That's crazy.
And so if you're cold, what are you going to do? You're going to sneak inside. You're going to light a fire. That's what people do.
Right.
We see folks, who, like we said, get third-degree burns because they're just trying to be warm. It's not malicious. It's not intentional. It's what it means to be a human being. And so we're seeing a lot more of that. In Fremont last night, we saw them pass that new ordinance where not only is it an anti-camping ordinance, but it also applies, like we said, to private property and aiding and abetting.
The fact that helping somebody is called aiding and abetting. Like,
right.
They're trying to feed a homeless person or provide a homeless person with warmth, with a blanket, is now called aiding and abetting.
Aiding and abetting.
That's
and
crazy.
They're scapegoating, because they're seeing all of this, these folks who are unhoused because they have nowhere to go, because they keep moving people all around. However, a bright light in this, we had a win, is we believe it's the first preliminary injunction to be issued since grants passed was in the city of Vallejo.
That's right.
And so we had an elderly African-American woman who built her own structure. It had windows. And it was so tight from any draft. And she had arthritis. She's severely disabled. She put when she could, she put work into it. And so the city came and said, we want to remove it. And she asked for reasonable accommodation for more time because she's disabled. And she said, listen, I'm disabled. It's going to be hard for me to move my stuff. Which, as she started to pack, she got more injured. She fell down and hurt her leg, which is what we talked about. There wasn't any emergency around her. There was no construction site, right? The neighbors loved her. She even made the land look better. She had Home Depot deliver a landscaping rock and brick. So it was very nice, this area that she set up. So what ended up happening is she applied to over 19 housing apartment complexes. She's on waiting lists. She did everything she was supposed to do without the city of Vallejo's help. And what they came back and said to her is, it doesn't matter, you have to move. And then they said, well, there's code violations, but they never provided her with a report. They never provided her with due process. So she filed a pro se complaint to stop them from removing her. And we came in and specially appeared for her. And what the judge found in this case, the judge finally issued a preliminary injunction because they said, the city of Vallejo said that she cannot camp anywhere in Vallejo, which is what we're seeing in Fremont. We're seeing that in Sacramento.
It's rearing up here. It's starting to rear up here in
Rear
Oakland.
up here. They also said, but she's disabled and can't carry her survival gear. They did absolutely nothing. You want to put her in a situation that's so much worse. And also, Vallejo said, well, we don't have any housing. But they do. They have 3 housing complexes. Plus, they work with the continuum of care. They threw up their hands and said, you know what? We don't have nothing to do with this.
Can you explain what continuum of care is to folks?
Yes. So a continuum of care is the county's agency. So here in Alameda County, we have our continuum of care. What that means is that all of the grant money, the funds that go for health care for the homeless, for housing people, it all passes through that continuum of care. So the various cities like Fremont, Oakland, Alameda, they all get funding through the continuum of care, and they have to partner and work with them. Well, what Vallejo is saying in Solano is, we don't work with the county. But that's how folks get housed. And so they did absolutely nothing. There was no emergency. And the court found, in fact, that it would be a state-created danger under the 14th Amendment. It would be a violation of her rights to move her. And what state-created danger means is that the city would place her in a worse position than what she was in prior to their action. So she's in a really good position. For 2 years, they hadn't messed with her. They were just moving her to move her for no reason. And so the judge, looking at the history, was very meticulous. Judge Coggins, she ruled that the city of Vallejo cannot move her. And so we're going to be giving status reports on her housing. She's done everything possible. Whereas in all these other cities, what we've seen is that courts would say, for example, the homeless individuals need to do more. They didn't do what they were supposed to do, or the temporary housing is sufficient. But many times, as you and I know, it's not. In Sacramento, for example, when they dismantled Camp Resolution, they wanted to put the most disabled into a tiny home village. The problem was several people used generators for their medical equipment. So one woman had oxygen, excuse me, that she needed 24 hours a day. And she has to have that on a generator. Well, these tiny home villages will not allow a generator. So it would literally kill her to go in there.
Right. But
They still wanted to say that she was service resistant.
yeah.
Right? And then a lot of folks have seizures because of extreme temperatures, especially people suffering with lupus and epilepsy.
Yeah.
So they also have generators to keep their temperatures controlled within their living space. They can't take advantage of the tiny cabins. So I think that it's very important now, as we fight these battles, that judges are seeing that you can't throw up your hands and say we're not going to offer anything.
Right.
And that we're starting to make inroads, because where we're going now is all or nothing, like Fremont. Now we're going to go after everybody.
Right.
You can have nothing. Get out.
Right.
So that was an exciting win for us.
That's a huge win. And it reminds me of a recent decision that was made in San Francisco where mid last year, the city of San Francisco, the county, city, because they're one and the same, decided that all RVs were now illegal.
That's right.
In the city of San Francisco. The thing is, in Frisco, most RV dwellers, they live near the campus, near Lake Merced. It's like pretty amazing. When I went over there to check it out, it was just this huge, massive community of RVs. Half of the people who lived there were students who were going to state.
Yes.
The other half were families with children who had lost their regular housing.
Yes.
And it was super clean. That's something I noticed. Like, there was no trash everywhere. People really kept the situation. I thought it was awesome that San Francisco State recognized that they had such a huge homeless student population.
Yes.
And really fought to allow their students to park their RVs there.
Yes.
And so this massive RV community flourished. And then last year, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors decided that, well, no, RVs are all illegal, and they just came after all the RVs and towed them and left people on the side of the road. And I guess maybe a month ago, was it? They realized they made a mistake.
Yes.
And they acknowledged the harm and the devastation and the trauma and the setbacks they caused people. So they repealed their ban. So RVs are no longer illegal in San Francisco, but dozens, almost 100, people lost their homes because lost their homes on wheels and were really set back in really terrible ways. But, cities have the opportunity to change their mistakes. All of us do, right?
All of us
All
do.
of us should have
That's right.
second and third chances.
That's right.
And, hopefully the city of Fremont, before it's too late, realizes their mistake. We pray that cities like Berkeley and Oakland realize their mistakes and their practices and how much harm is being caused, and that they actually change their ways and do right by not just the unhoused people, but the housed people too. What they're doing in destroying homeless encampments, homeless communities, that ripples into the housed community.
That's right.
Right? The trauma that's being created is going to ripple into the house community. The desperation and despair is going to ripple into the house community. That's going to look like mental health issues that are going to be impacting everybody. That's going to look like increased crime because people are now pushed up against the wall to survive. It goes on and on and on, and that needs to stop. And I hope the city of Oakland and the cities across the Bay Area stop what they're doing. And
Absolutely.
and actually learn from this mayor of LA and the city of LA, where when I was born in Los Angeles, there was a strip of land called Skid Row when I was a little kid.
Yes.
And my mom used to have, this is the first time I got involved with homelessness. My mom was very religious, and she had all her children be part of the different like missions, I guess they're called, or services in our church. And I decided to join the Skidettes, which were all these old ladies who made lunches for them. So I was this like little 10-year-old skidette with all the old ladies. And but now, when I was a kid, it was a row called Skid Row. It was out on the skids, and it was a row. Now it's got its own. In LA, each neighborhood or district has its own like green sign that with like silver lining, so you know you've driven into this new neighborhood. Skid Row is now a neighborhood, and it's got its own sign. The city of Los Angeles has acknowledged that, and it's massive. It's not just a row, it's massive. And it was an area that they tried to gentrify and could not. And so the city actually decided just to make it a neighborhood for unhoused people. So, and it's not perfect by any means, you know. However, it's a place that people know they can go and not get harassed for being homeless. And all the homeless services know that they can go to Skid Row and provide their services for people there. And the mayor of LA, she took a stand against Grants Pass. She also took a stand against Governor Newsom. Making an executive order forcing state officials and threatening to pull funding from cities who didn't get rid of their encampments. And she said, no, I'm not going to do that. And she, during COVID, Governor Newsom gave all the mayors of the cities across California, the power to commandeer hotels during COVID to house their unhoused. Here in Oakland, Libby Schaaf refused to do so. We try to, advocate with her to be like, you got the power to do it. She said no. So we ended up taking a hotel, and then it ended up becoming a very successful hotel program. Started off as a direct action. It became a full-fledged hotel program. And then, but in LA, the mayor in LA, she commandeered hotels, and she didn't stop after COVID. She's made a public statement saying, in my city, homelessness is more important than tourism. So, how we address homelessness, how cities, how politicians, how all these people with the resources and money address homelessness is totally a choice. And, shout outs to, I think her name is Bass. Mayor Bass.
Mayor Bass.
In LA for choosing the path of humanity. And I hope that, our politicians here in Oakland can learn from her and choose the path of humanity too. But,
I agree. We have to completely change how we do things, because what's happening now, as you were saying, Nita, these sweeps trickle into everything. And also with the funding issues that we're having right now, as we know, in April of 2024, the California State Auditor did an audit and found that $24 billion over the past 5 years has been spent on housing and homeless resources, but there was no oversight. $24 billion. And the oversight was supposed to be done, I believe it's the California Interagency on Homeless.
For homeless,
California, something like that. And when the governor issued his executive order, the oversight commission that he put in charge was the same commission that provided no oversight. So he said, come up with the models. He asked the Interagency on Homelessness to come up with the models. And what I think that we need to do, because everyone says, how are we going to solve this? And I think the first thing is we have to employ and build, every jurisdiction should, county, in the same way we have tenant protection boards, we need homeless protection boards, where every provider has to register with the board.
Absolutely.
Also, every landlord that takes advantage of these programs where they're getting a subsidy needs to register as well. That way, there's complete oversight. In addition, excuse me, unhoused individuals who are housed will have the ability, excuse me, to file complaints. And the board can then provide oversight that's currently not being given. Excuse me.
I'd offer you water, but I have none.
I thought I had one in my pocket. It's okay. So, additionally, there are no the laws right now for shelters provide no protections for any individual who is homeless. If you're in a shelter, you can be kicked out without notice as a shelter resident, unlike a tenant or a homeowner,
Right.
who has their protections built into the law. Furthermore, as a civil rights attorney that defends only the homeless and formerly homeless, our organization is only funded by private donations. So, organizations that do unlawful detainers or who help with Social Security appeals, the funding for those services is sort of built into the statute. You're going to get lawyers' fees. If you defend the homeless, there is nothing built into the law to fund any attorney. So if you do civil litigation, you may not get your lawyer's fees till 2 or 3 years down the line. So for folks like us who are on the front lines, what do we do? And then more importantly, if the justice system, meaning our legal system, is built to help those who are most vulnerable, shouldn't we then pour resources into providing them with proper representation? Because what ends up happening, because they don't have tenants' rights, because when they enter temporary shelter, which we know they're going to enter because permanent housing is not readily available, if they get kicked out, the service provider says, we successfully house this person, but they don't track when that person goes back out on the street.
Right.
I get them, right?
Right.
So if we could build into these protection boards fees, or fees for attorneys as well, so they'll do this work. It's very difficult to do this work because the population is growing. They get into this program, they'll get into a temporary shelter, they'll get kicked out with like an hour's notice. And who's going to fight for them? There are no attorneys. There's no. They have to pay
Right.
their bills too. We take on big loans.
Literally, we're looking at probably one of the only attorneys in the Bay Area in Northern California.
There are just a few of us I can count on my hand. The other one is going to turn 86 on Friday.
Right.
And that's who we have. And
For
so
real.
it's so hard. So if you want to change a system, because we know if an attorney gets involved, even if it's just for a letter, right, there's oversight. So that's why I think we have to approach it differently. If we could spend $24 billion in 5 years,
Wow.
and we take a portion of that, and we provide oversight through a tenant protection board, very similar, like I said, Oakland, Berkeley, we have some of the strongest tenant protections. If you provided that to an individual as they get off the street, as they get into housing, as they're getting their resources from the resource providers who are dropping the ball, we're seeing that time and time again. It could take up to 4 years to get housing because the housing navigator didn't do their job.
Right.
Someone was kicked off the list because there's supposed to be a verification done every 3 months. These are very complex systems to navigate. If we don't build those resources in, what's going to happen is the same thing that's happening now. There's no accountability. There's nothing but scapegoating. There's no one who's providing oversight. We haven't fundamentally changed the system.
Right.
And so that's what I believe, based on my experience every day, is that we have to build in protections for every person. Just because you're not a tenant or a homeowner doesn't mean you don't have rights. But right now, if you're not a tenant and you're not a homeowner, your very existence is illegal. It's unlawful.
Right. And you mentioned something with where all this money's being spent with these interventions, and if people get into shelters or safe parks, they can be evicted so
Yes.
quickly. There's also one thing I've read, the contracts that people have signed to be in the different Oakland interventions, whether
Yes.
it's St. Vincent de Paul or the 66th Avenue Safe Park or the Tough Sheds, and people literally are. The city has put a clause in those contracts where people are signing away that they're not residents, that they don't
Right.
that they don't have any rights. So it's like you put someone in a situation where, like, do you want to be on the streets or do you want this promise of like safety, which
That's
is
right.
a joke because those places are not safe at all. They're super mismanaged and just not safe. And or do you want to come into this place, but you have to sign away your rights so that there's no grievance process, or in some of them where they say there's a grievance process, it's a joke. I know in one particular site, the security guards are best friends with the manager of the site. The manager is married to his boss, who is the site supervisor. The site supervisor's best friend is the program manager. So grievances don't happen on that site. And if you turn in a grievance, you get evicted quickly.
That's right.
You know?
And that's if you're able, and I say this with all compassion, if you're able to have the executive functioning to do that.
That part.
Because we know that unhoused communities are disproportionately disabled. And many times, individuals who don't even have the capability, who need that extra support, are not given that. So they're automatically taken advantage of.
Yeah.
So we had a situation, for example, and we reached out to the city of Oakland, my colleague Ian did numerous times, where during COVID, people were given rapid rehousing vouchers, and those are to prevent homelessness. So those vouchers go to people who have recently become homeless. It's a subsidy, and it starts off paying 100% of the rent, then it goes to 75%, like 50%, 30, 15, and then you're fully responsible to pay, because the idea is you hit a bump and you're able to, through work, once you get situated, you can pay the full amount of rent. And in the Bay Area, let's just say you get a studio. That studio is $1,850. Well, they gave a whole bunch of those vouchers out to folks who had severe disabilities, who, when they got the voucher, hadn't even got their Social Security disability approved.
Wow.
So they moved them in, paid 100% of their rent. As we know, once you obtain Social Security disability, that's at most $1,200 a month.
Right.
That will never pay your rent. So then these individuals who got into that housing were quickly priced out because they would never be able to pay. And they didn't understand what just happened to me. And who does that person that this happens to, who do they go to? They come to us. They come to where do we go? We're one of the only places, because there really are, aside from us and East Bay Community Law Center, no one's funded to do this work.
Right.
Their mothers come, family members come and say, what do we do with our family member who will never be able to afford rent, who needs a different subsidy? How do we hold these individuals accountable? And then when we call City of Oakland, or we called Oakland Housing Authority, no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to deal with it, because it is a labyrinth of complexity. And so that's why I think it's so complex that we have to fundamentally change the entire system to provide oversight and legal representation, as well as advocates within these legal organizations who can come in and say, this was wrong from the beginning.
Yeah.
And then cities need to review their contracts, because they're paying so much money. Millions are going to these providers,
right,
who are ultimately harming their clients, but they're not being punished, because what do we see? The same resource providers are getting the contracts over and over again.
Yep.
So that's why we definitely have a lot of work ahead of us.
A lot of work. Yeah, I think that like what you said about how you outlined basically what's happening with all of, like, at least Oakland's homeless industrial complex, of these solutions, or these interventions are put in place that have not been well thought out, or they've had no input from unhoused people, so they fall super short, and things like what you just described get created, where it's like, had you talked to someone who had disabilities, you would know that they would never be able to, no one who gets a full amount of disability check would ever be able to afford that.
That's right.
You know, or even with like Section 8 vouchers, handing out Section 8 vouchers. There's so many folks in the encampments when we started doing this work who had Section 8 vouchers, but the landlords no longer accepted them. You know, back in the day, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, you could get, like, I think the top amount you could get for a Section 8 was $1,600. And in the old Oakland, that was a lot of money. So landlords loved that. You had a
Yes.
Section 8 voucher, they
Yes.
were guaranteed getting $1,600. You're lucky if you could find a place for $1,600 these days. And so landlords don't want that voucher because they could get twice the amount. And so you have a lot of folks in the encampments with vouchers that nobody wants. And so they're handing out these vouchers, but they're not addressing that there's a bigger problem here, that nobody wants the vouchers anymore.
That's right.
And those vouchers run out. If you don't find a place,
That's right.
then you lose your voucher.
That's right.
And then if you got your voucher, whatever city you've cut, here was another crazy thing. So the rule was, whatever city you got your voucher in, you have to use that voucher for 1 year in that city before you transfer that voucher into another city.
Right.
So, I'd be helping people fill out their paperwork. And one time I was helping someone fill out their Section 8 voucher, and it was a whole new, form. And the form was, if you're in Oakland, it was so bad here that how they addressed the fact that landlords no longer accept these vouchers because they want more money for it. The form for Oakland allows Oakland voucher holders to apply to different cities now.
Wow.
Right? And I was like, that's kind of how did that happen? How did that happen? Because that's that had to be a federal process to have the feds approve Oakland HUD to say, yeah, you don't have to use your voucher here. But it's a federal mandate to use your voucher in the city you got it for a year. So that threw me off when I was filling out people's paperwork. We're like, where did this happen? And then to know that they could change the rules that quick made me think, because one of the biggest issues around talking about affordable housing and our need for affordable housing is it's a federal formula from the HUD department that we use to decide what affordable housing is, and the formula doesn't work because it's based on what the median or the average income is in a city or a region. And with incomes increasing because more middle class and elite people are moving up here, and with rent prices increasing, the median income has increased. So what is affordable has increased. So what, let's say 10 years ago, somebody who made maybe $20,000 was considered low income, right? 20 years ago, somebody who made under $10,000 was low income. But see how that jumped? Today, if you make $89,000 a year,
right.
you're considered low income and you qualify for affordable housing. And with that same formula, they've decided that affordable housing is what the prices are now. $2,000 for a one bedroom is considered affordable housing.
That's right.
And so I was like, if they can change with a snap of the finger, all of a sudden change a law that allows just Oakland, because Fremont didn't do it, Hayward didn't do it, Berkeley didn't do it, San Francisco didn't do it. Oakland was the only paperwork I saw where they changed it and allowed anyone who had an Oakland voucher to go get housing somewhere else. And if they could do that for Oakland, then how come they can't change the formula for everybody else? Because that's a problem that's happening across the country. This formula doesn't work. This formula is now deciding that middle-class people are the median and that middle-class people are the ones who qualify for affordable housing.
Yes. Well, that's true, and it's interesting, as you bring up, the majority of folks who are on Social Security, so I'm going to say those who are disabled and those who are elderly, are making just a little over $12,000 to $15,000 a year.
So they would be extremely.
That's extremely
now, low income.
If you're on GA, that's what,
that's
$375 or $450 a month.
That's even less.
A month.
Yeah.
And so that's where people get stuck and they can't afford housing, because how do you get back from that? And then if you don't have a credit history, or now, as we know, and we're preaching to the choir, because as we see time and time again, you got to make 3 times the rent.
Right.
Who can make 3 times the rent?
Who makes that much money?
And you go around, and I just think about, it's just getting so difficult. And even in rural areas, we're seeing high rents in places like Stockton and Sacramento, or up here like the Bay Area.
Yeah. I always trip out on who knew that Oakland was going to be one of the most expensive places to live in the United States.
So true.
And then what I trip out on too, so like on a broader level, so California has the 7th largest economy in the entire world.
That's right.
We also have a third of the United States' homeless population.
Yes.
So we have the most we have more than half of the almost
right.
half the homeless. And we're competing with the budgets of like China. We're competing with the budget of the United States. So if we have this much money, if we're one of the richest places in the entire world, how are we even allowing homelessness to blow up like this? It doesn't even make any sense.
No. It's the rents are so high. The rent, no, people cannot afford rent. And we see it time and time again where individuals will move into their car.
Yeah.
I have a friend, she's a pastor. And she can't afford rent. She sleeps in the parking lot at Walmart. She does her Bible study, everything out of her car.
Wow.
At the Walmart.
Wow. Wow.
And people wonder, and I see so many women and I know men are doing it too, but I see a lot of women now who are living in their cars, who are hiding out in different spots, who are trying to be able to afford to live, especially elderly women. And they all say the same thing. The wait lists are 4 years, 5 years long.
Man.
They've tried everything they can do, and they just don't have enough to be able to pay for monthly rent.
They don't. And then a lot of the wait lists, at least the ones that I had been on, and I'm still on wait lists that I signed up for 10 years ago. And I'm finally housed, but I'm still on those. My name still hasn't been called up.
That's
you know
right.
what I'm saying?
That's right.
And then some of those wait lists, I remember one time we got to the top of the wait list, and then every year they reset. So you might get to the top, but if you don't get a place by the time of the years end up and they reset it, whoops, you're no longer on the top. I got a letter in the mail for one of these housing places saying that you're on the top 10. You got 9 other people ahead of you, so get ready. And this was towards the end of the year, and then boop, reset. You're no longer at the top of the list.
That's right.
You're number 3,593. And I'm like, but I was number 10. What happened? I've been waiting for like 10 years, you know? So, yeah, this whole housing system just doesn't work. We really need to rethink housing. And I think the big thing is that this country, like it looks at everything, it looks at housing as a commodity. It looks at housing as this profit-making thing, not as a right and a need, a basic need that every living being, not just humans, like animals need shelter.
That's right.
Like anything that wants to stay alive needs shelter. And we don't look at shelter as something that everyone needs. It's looked as, can you afford it?
That's right.
You know, that's the paradigm people looking at it. Not, oh, God, you need that. No, well, can you afford it?
That's right.
And until we switch that paradigm, that's not going to happen. And you heard that Trump last week pulled out of the UN. The U.S. is no longer a member of the United Nations.
Yeah, so you started, when we first started talking, you talked about fascism. And the thing that most disturbed me, and a lot of things disturb me, like it does everyone, right? Every day we're seeing different things, especially like the executive order on the Second Amendment, right?
Right.
Take away all federal regulations on the guns, because that's what we need, right? Are more guns, especially with all the school shootings and whatnot. Pulling out of all of these organizations and just the things he's talking about. But what disturbed me the most is the ethnic cleansing language. So when he talked about the plane crash over the Potomac in Washington, D.C., and he blamed that on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion practices.
That's crazy.
And then he said, well, the reason this happened is because we need people who are psychologically superior. And so one of the pilots in the helicopter, their parents didn't want to release that it was a woman pilot because they knew that includes diversity, equity, and inclusion includes gender. And that's what he's saying, right? A woman was flying the helicopter, and we need people, it crashed because we need people who are psychologically superior. And we heard that in Nazi Germany, right? We heard that type of language. And so I think that if people aren't paying attention this culmination of what we're seeing, the complete lack of oversight, not only of homeless programs, but also at the executive
Everything.
level, right?
Yes.
And the hate language, and the complete gutting of pulling out of the UN and USAID, and going in without any oversight. The fact that Elon Musk and he can bring in
Crazy.
folks with no vetting, no background check. We can't even get a job at Burger King without a background check, but they can walk into the Treasury Department and get access to the computer
everything.
systems. Everything.
To everyone's
is
information.
outrageous. Everyone should be angry, and I think, you know, once people stop being shell-shocked, they got to fight back, you know?
Yeah, I was watching a news piece on like Latinos who had voted for Trump and how they're freaking out because they thought when they thought the immigrants they were going after were going to be the criminals, not them. But now these Trump supporters, these Latinos who had voted for Trump, their family members are getting deported, or they're U.S. citizens, but they're being profiled as undocumented. And so I was just listening to the report this morning, and I'm like, what did you think when you were at the Republican convention and saw signs everywhere that said mass deportations now?
That's right.
How did you think they were going to differentiate you from that brown person?
That's
you know?
right.
So I think people who voted for Trump are starting to realize that they made a really big mistake. You know, not that their vote even counted anyway, because didn't Trump even made an announcement over the press like, well, you know, we rigged the elections. That's how I won. Like, he admitted it.
It's, you know, it's very disturbing, and that's why I think that we have to all get involved in protests. I was at an Indivisible protest last week. What was very interesting about that, you know, Indivisible, that organization held protests because of Elon Musk just being let into the Treasury and everything else. But that was the focus, right? Excuse me. And they brought in labor. They brought in education. I was there speaking. And we really do have to get involved, everyone, as much as we can, to fight back and let our voice be heard. And whether that be if you're want to be a part of some kind of activist group for education or something for something, do a little bit to get involved, because it's very important for us now to fight back and to also create unity and coalition with other groups. It's the only way that we're going to be able to show our voice.
For real. And that, speaking of that, there's a action happening this Friday between that's being brought up with Where Do You Go and Berkeley high school students.
That's correct. And you know what's crazy about this? I love this, and it's just a really interesting situation. There's a lot of, it's a very difficult situation, but there's this silver lining, and that is, you know, we have an encampment in Civic Center Park in Berkeley. And the reason that encampment is there, which is right across from the high school, is because the encampment was at Old City Hall.
And then it got torn
And
down.
then it got swept, and it got moved across the street because the city of Berkeley didn't uphold their promise to us. They said they were going to house all folks there, and then we would close the camp. They didn't. They came at 4 a.m.
That's
so
crazy.
everyone moved across the street. And so there was an incident at the park where a gentleman assaulted a young woman. He had tapped her inappropriately. And the media immediately blamed the encampment, immediately blamed the residents. But that man, who is unhoused, was committing crimes throughout downtown Berkeley. Sexual assaults. Now, instead of being outraged and saying that every woman should be protected from violence, woman, man, child, right? We should all be safe from sexual violence, interpersonal violence. Instead, they blamed the entire encampment. And they said, you know, it started a thing where Berkeley High School parents said, you know, these folks shouldn't be there when all the resources are there. and they unfairly scapegoated, like they're doing all over this country. It's all about them. So while the parents are meaning to say that the encampment should be moved, the students are saying, no, wait a minute.
Wow, from the mouth of babes, huh?
Right? And that's what they said. They're like, the guy, this wasn't one of the residents. And that's where we as a community should be outraged against violence that's against women, period. Right? Or violence against men. Rather than saying this entire encampment, we got to sweep them all, knowing that in this particular encampment, folks are very vulnerable. They're elderly. There was an 80-year-old gentleman who was sleeping on a park bench. We have another woman who's 76. She's out there, an attorney who was evicted from her apartment.
Oh, wow.
A longtime resident.
Wow.
And so she came into our camp where we made her feel safe. We gave her, where do we go? We gave her a tent. We gave her a cot. We made sure that her tent was ADA accessible because she uses a walker and a wheelchair. And you know, tents have a lip that is very hard to get over if you have to use mobile devices to help you with your mobility. So we always make sure we put in an ADA compliant porta potty near her tent. That's what we do. So why blame them because they've been victimized by the system? There's no way an 80-year-old should be sleeping on a park bench.
Right.
And the reason he was because he asked the shelter. He said, listen, there's a COVID
This is the
outbreak.
shelter across the street?
Yeah, he said, there's a COVID outbreak. Can you accommodate me? I don't want to get sick and die. Can I be isolated? They said no. So he walked out with his only possession, which is a tiny harp, and he sleeps on a park bench because he doesn't want to die. But that's who you're blaming for this crime when you know that this person has been hurting people. And so the students understand that because they were already planning this, and they said, no, this isn't right. We want to stand up for the rights of all people, especially those who are homeless in Berkeley, because we need to come up with better solutions. So they're going to march on Valentine's Day.
That's beautiful.
And they're going to have speakers. It's a really powerful event. And if you want more information, you can always find us on social media. Where do we go? There's going to be a lot of information. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. And we're promoting it. We're going to have a lot of speakers. But I think that's the same issue we're having now, where there's one generation who's saying, we don't need this by our students. Some have even said, well, look at Where Do We Go is brainwashing them. No, they figured this out on their own. But they look across the street and they go, wow, these folks don't want to be unhoused. Where their parents are saying they want to be unhoused, they're dirty, they're criminals, why are they here? The students are saying, no, we need to fight and we need to get better treatment for Berkeley's unhoused. So that's really powerful, and I hope to see more of that.
Yeah. And shout out to those students for not allowing the adults to use them as a division, as a thorn, as the wedge.
Right.
You're right. And so, yeah, definitely. And where will the protest start, and what time and where?
I believe it's going to start at 2:30 at Civic Center Park.
Okay.
I believe.
Awesome. And like you said, people can find out more by going to Where Do We Go on Facebook and Instagram. Since you're doing work like all over the Bay and all over Northern California,
yes,
do you see similarities with resistance, like with how people are resisting these attacks, these attempts to make unhoused people disappear?
Similarities, yes. So I think you're seeing a new spark of enthusiasm in collaboration. So I think now folks realize that there's a need to unify, and to unify with other groups, and to get bigger, especially in California, because it is so aggressive here. It's aggressive all across the country, but we know in the Ninth Circuit, the 4 states that have the highest numbers in homelessness are here.
Yeah.
And in California, I'm seeing this, more people are joining organizations. They're having more protests. Now, what's interesting, in Sacramento, they have about 2,500 Sacramento Homeless Union members.
Wow.
There's like 10,000 homeless folks in Sacramento.
That's a big chunk of people.
That's a big chunk of people to be organized.
Yeah.
And we know what that's like, because in Oakland we have, when I was at the last Homeless Commission meeting, 1,400 encampments. A lot of people.
Hella.
But in Sacramento, everyone is joining together because there's a church. So I went last Saturday, and a woman there with the Homeless Union leased out a commercial space to have church and to also be a community hub. So what that looks like is every Saturday they have a 2-hour church service, and then they hand out resources. So they have a beautiful buffet with homemade stews and bread and just all of just such a wonderful layout. And then they give out things like toilet paper and clothes, and they hand out coffee and pet food. They also have a photographer there that does portraits, so you could come the next week and get a framed portrait, because a lot of folks don't have that. And it's so all of the church members are the in-house, but also folks who are low income living in the surrounding apartment communities. So a lot of families come. Well, the neighbors got upset, and they told the landlord that they don't like that they're having church service for the homeless and for the poor because it's bringing too many into the neighborhood.
Oh, my God.
And they're alleging that crime is happening.
Oh, my
and they're
God.
literally having church service and praying in the parking lot.
Wow.
But they don't like the look of that.
Wow.
So the homeless union was getting together to fight that. So we're seeing how people have to come together. We're seeing in Oakland, right, the increased sweeps. In Sacramento, there's increased sweeps. And then when you try to do mutual aid, they're fighting that too. In Vallejo, it's the same thing, increased sweeps with trash. They're taking people's things. So I definitely see similarities, and I see the opportunity for all of us to come together in one powerful voice to demand an end to such bias and fascist practices, where we're hearing the language of ethnic cleansing, of segregation, because especially now with Fremont, when you pass an ordinance that threatens other people from helping you, that's the kind of stuff we saw in Germany. That's the kind of stuff where people don't want to help, right? They're scared. What's going to happen to me? We saw that happen in the South. We see this happening in areas where there's lots of conflict.
Yeah.
So I think the similarities that we're finding is that people are trying to figure out how to get organized so that they can join together and fight back. I'm going to go next weekend, and we're going to talk to the landlord because it was in the paper, to see if we can come up with a proposal so that they continue to provide church services. And then when they're not using the church and everyone's outside, the county was there in the church giving vaccinations.
Wow.
And I just couldn't believe, have we gotten to a point now where we want to chase out the most vulnerable because of the way they look from worshiping God? Is that where we're at? And that's where we're at.
That's so crazy.
So I think there are similarities. We're all fighting, trying to come together to figure out how to deal with this.
Yeah.
And the law is slow, so people have to get organized.
Yes, definitely. Do you find that across all the cities there's this total lack of like accountability and transparency when it comes to how all this money is being spent and how the interventions are being managed?
Absolutely. I find that there is suffering across the board. I find that my job is making very horrible things less horrible so many times a day. People are just crying. They're being kicked out. I'm seeing definitely more hunger in places where they do multiple sweeps in a day.
Yeah.
Because people can't hold on to their food. They can't store their food. They have nothing like that.
Right.
People are calling me from Sacramento, from San Luis Obispo, saying, Andrea, what do? I don't have no place to go. I don't have anything to eat. And I try to give them resources. So I do feel, and that's why I feel that there needs to be a complete overhaul where they build in like a tenant protection board, a homeless protection board to provide oversight. Also, it's wrong to expect someone to complain about the person who's giving them benefits, because it's very intimidating and scary. So all of these folks who are getting services, a check, money to feed their kids, money, or someone who helps them with medication, to go to that same provider and say, you know what, I don't feel this is right, and then bam, they throw them out in the street because the law doesn't protect them.
Right.
So many people are just suffering.
Yes.
And I'm seeing it increase in every city. Every city, people will call me and they need so much legal assistance, and there's no help. There's no attorneys. There's no funding. They say, Andrea, and there's only one of me. It's very, very hard.
It's very hard. Yeah. I appreciate you so much for all the work you do, because it is not easy. And you really did answer a call, for real. And, years ago, around 2018, 2019, after we had filed our lawsuit here for the encampment we had on Eads in Elmhurst, I was able to be part of the National Lawyers Guild conversation to create a working group of attorneys and law students who wanted to get involved with, using the law to fight for the rights of unhoused people. And I know here in Oakland, we were already collecting declarations. We were already doing Know Your Rights trainings. We were already doing legal observation during the evictions and inside the interventions. What we needed was attorneys.
Yes.
And so I walked into that space with hope. And after almost a year of just talking, they decided what they were going to do were collect declarations and do legal observations and do Know Your Rights trainings, but nobody wanted to take it to court. And I'm like, we don't need you guys to do any of the stuff that you said you're going to do, because we're already doing that. None of us are attorneys. We need attorneys. And you answered that call. Out of all the attorneys I have met over the years doing this work, you answered that call. And other people shied away. And so props to you, because it is not an easy job. It is not glamorous. It is a whole body of work where you're challenging and asserting things that have never been challenged before, that have never been asserted before. So you're trying to interpret the Constitution in a way that it's never been interpreted before, and that's not easy.
Work is the amount of work, and I wish we had help. And if I could have, if I won the lottery or someone said, Andrea, what would you do? In addition to creating the protection boards, in addition to creating laws that would provide built-in statutory legal fees, so we could fund this, right? You got to be able to fund it, because then a small nonprofit, I could hire, 15 attorneys and know that as we represent, I'm going to be able to sustain this until I can get the grants. I could create a variety of funding sources. Additionally, in the same way that we fund criminal conflicts panels, right? I would fund, so I've been very fortunate to serve on the Pro Per panel for the Northern District of California. And
can you explain what the Pro Per panel is?
Okay, so the Pro Per panel.
And what the Northern District is?
Okay, the Northern District, California district courts, all district courts in the country are separated by districts.
And these are part of the Supreme Court?
No, these are a part of just the lowest level of federal court is the district court. And then there's the Court of Appeals, and then there's the Supreme Court.
Okay.
So in California, we have many districts. We have the Eastern District, which is Sacramento. Vallejo is a part of the Eastern District. And then there's the Northern District, which is San Francisco, Oakland. There's the Central District, which is Los Angeles. And the Southern District, which is San Diego, those areas. So in the Northern District, they have what's called a Pro Per panel, which I believe one of the judges that we really love, Judge Chen, founded. And that is so that when individuals go into federal court, as you know is very confusing, they can get an attorney to represent them. These are attorneys that donate their time. And at the end, they can get legal fees, right? Well, for an organization such as ours, it's great, but it's still hard to help homeless individuals who are coming in because you don't get fees till the end. So I think that if, I were the head of the Bar Association, or I were head of California in this way, a part of my solution focus would be to pay attorneys hourly, nonprofits who would take this, because we're in the trenches. I know how to handle these clients. I know what the issues are, but it's a lot of work to sustain a small law office. It can be difficult because I help everyone for free, right? That's the thing. But they could get our expertise because I've done a lot of federal cases and state cases, but I would pay them hourly. I would make it much more accessible for the nonprofits because a lot of big firms will represent, different cases. But I think when you're providing legal defense to folks who are unhoused, there's a whole host of issues because they may not be in the same space. They might be getting swept. There's a lot of issues that you have to help to manage. So I think I would add that in. We need to look at be solutions focused to be able to help folks, especially those filing lawsuits like you did. Like Oakland, they started pro per. San Rafael started pro per because there's not enough of us.
Right.
But then we have to jump in. But then all of this stuff takes time, right? And so in addition to creating all of these protections and oversight, I would also build that in at the state level and at the federal level, because we just don't, or provide grants specifically for attorneys who can do this kind of work that's outside the normal, Social Security benefit work, which is so important. HAC is the best, and HAC is the Homeless Action Center that helps so many unhoused folks with their benefits. They couldn't get housed without HAC. I have nothing but great things to say, but if we could do that and multiply that in the other areas of homelessness, especially because folks who are unhoused now and who are coming out of it are facing numerous issues. A bomb, if you've been living in a street, a bomb went off in your life.
Yeah.
And so in order to help with that, to straighten out many things, you're going to need benefits, but you're also going to need legal representation. You're going to need a lot of help, and I think that's mental health services. And so that's where I think that we could really help people across the board and organizations that are helping folks out in the street.
Yeah, definitely. I think that sounds like an amazing plan you have. I would love to see that go into effect.
Me too.
What do you think is going to happen? Like, because you're saying it's a struggle with what little funding you do get.
Yes.
And with nonprofits now coming under attack. With getting there.
Yes.
Because he signed the executive order.
Yes.
We talked about this last week, where the Senate and the Congress have been trying to push this legislation to basically, without any kind of due process, just revoke any nonprofit status and take all their funding if they weren't in line with the principles of Trump's administration.
Yes.
And forget the House and Senate, he signed it as an executive order last week.
Yes.
So what we're going to see happening is a lot of nonprofits are going to be losing their funding. How do you think that's going to impact y'all when y'all are already so underfunded?
I don't know, because every day I walk by faith.
There you go.
I do this. I could go make so much money, but that is not where I am, right? So as I always tell people, in the wise words of Tupac, I know how to make $1 out of 15 cents. And so we practice law in that same way. Our organization, sometimes we only have a month and a half left to run. And I just say, you know what, I'm going to keep practicing and helping people. When I say practicing law, I'm going to go to meetings. I'm going to keep doing as much as I possibly can to help as many people as I can till it runs out. Because this was a big step for us as a nonprofit. And, you know, you try to find funding, but this is so nuanced what we do, right?
Yeah.
And normally if you end up with us, it's a problem that no one's been able to fix, but a life-changing problem, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, I helped a woman, a mother and a father had a baby in a tent on the side of the road, on the side of the freeway. So what does that mean? That means that that baby has to get a birth certificate because that baby was not born in the hospital. And if you don't have a birth certificate, that means you don't get housing. And you have a baby. So the social workers told them to go to Vital Statistics. They did. Vital Statistics thought that they were lying. This is an African-American couple who was placed in the Project Room Key hotels at the Coliseum. The police show up with
Oh my
warrants
God.
and arrest them for fraud.
Oh my God.
And CPS takes the baby.
Oh my God.
So OSHA and they call us screaming.
Oh my God.
All they were trying to do was get a birth certificate. So it takes like a month because once
Right.
they get the baby back. Okay. 2 years later, I get a call. They're still in the Project Room Key Hotel.
Whoa.
With the baby who's now 2, a little over 2 years old. The social worker never followed up, so they never received the birth certificate for the baby. So now it's even harder.
Wow, because it's been 2 years.
They did a well
Wow.
check, and there's roaches all in the hotel, so they take the baby. Mom says, there's roaches in all the rooms. Well, but they can't get housed because they don't have a birth certificate for the baby, and they're terrified to start the process because they were arrested before. So in order to get housing, I wrote so many declarations. Like, I was there. I remember when the baby was born. I can attest to it. It was not their fault. So we had to get a court order, but they still don't have the baby back because even though that first accusation was false, it's still on their record.
It's following them around.
Right? But this birth certificate, so it has to get a court order, and then it takes 9 months to actually get the record because the baby wasn't born in a hospital and it's after a year.
Wow.
So this has followed them and their family this entire time because there was no oversight, right? If someone had been paying attention, someone would know that they've been sitting in that hotel for 2 years.
That's crazy.
No one moved along. They couldn't get housing. No one helped them with the birth certificate. And so our organization, for example, I went to court. I had to get all this stuff. I had to provide all this documentation. We pay for all their lifts to and from court because they're still going to dependency court trying to get their son back. Their son was placed far away. It wasn't their fault. From the beginning, they had a baby in a tent on the side of the road. And if we don't get this birth certificate, they'll never get housing. That boy will never get into, the little boy will never get into school, but who's going to help them? That's the kind of stuff that we do because there's no one to help with those things, but those things happen.
Right.
All the time we're seeing people are terrified to go to a hospital because they know once they find out you're homeless, they're going to come and take that
Take the
baby.
baby.
So women aren't getting, and imagine, I didn't even think to ask her because I'm so worried about this baby and them getting housed and arrested. She had not had any medical care since she got pregnant through having the baby all the way forward.
Dang.
No one thought, even I'm not a social worker, I'm an attorney. But this is what I'm saying. We're paying isn't that something that you would think, okay, well, you had the baby. Like anybody help me. I need a team. So that's why I think it's so important that we have to change how we fund this. We have to build in that oversight. We have to make sure that resource providers, if you don't do your job, we would get fired. Trump is firing everybody.
Right.
We don't just hand out money
Right.
because disproportionately it's elderly people who are being abused, disproportionately brown and black folks, disabled folks, poor white folks, anyone who is vulnerable. And so for me, every day is a walk in faith because I don't know. I don't know if I can always practice law anywhere, but I can't do this. And so every day is by faith.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What can I do? I don't like sometimes there's only a month left and I think, oh, please, we got to do a fundraiser, and folks are given, and it's hard right now because everybody's losing their jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I wasn't doing this, who and I'm
would?
not saying like, look at me, I'm doing this,
You're
right?
holding a very large piece.
But
and doing some serious heavy lifting.
Yeah.
No one else. Like I said, I went to the National Lawyers Guild. I had them captive for a whole year, and nothing came out of it.
It's very it's very unique what we do because we truly do help the people that nobody will help.
Right.
The person who's in. So what we found out when we had our protest encampments is, the city of Berkeley spent all this money on the SCU team, Specialized Care Unit, and because of all the police protests, we want to have what we've talked about is we want to have specialized care units that respond to mental health emergencies, so that we don't bring in cops with lethal force. Right? We've seen it time and time again on the news. So we would have folks who would come into our encampments and we would give them safety. They would start to come out of their psychosis, but still be there, right? But they would, like literally, one lady came, because I sleep in encampments when necessary, and she put her tent like halfway on mine, and she slept for 2 days, and we started to feed her, and she started to come out of it, and we saw these tremendous changes in her. But because she's had a lifetime in mental health, she knows what it's like to be arrested. She still has her challenges, but you knew, it was obvious. And so she would have a hard time, and she'd say, Andrea, call SCU, and I would. And they first started saying, well, we can't come into the encampment. Well, when they came and swept, people were freaking out, right? They were scared. It's triggering for many people. They were screaming. The police go, why did you zip up a tent? Because she's screaming. Other people, right? And so we called SCU and we said, we need mental health support. People are getting swept and they have mental disabilities, and it was obvious, right? And so we found out their new policy is they don't go into homeless encampments because it's too dangerous.
That's right. And wasn't creating that entire program specifically
for that,
for going into encampments.
Right. Now,
Wow.
OSHA and I,
Wow.
OSHA's,
Wow.
at the time, remember, he's like
Yeah.
80, OSHA's like down all the time. He's in there with me. And that's why we started Where Do We Go? And what I noticed, and the reason why I would always go lobby, is because I thought to myself, why are the lawyers, when I look around and I look for service providers who are in the camps, why is it just OSHA and I? And so, to me, if I were in charge of all of this, after doing all that other stuff, another thing that I would do, if you're getting money for mental health, you went to school for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your whole career path is built on helping people who have diseases of the mind, who have difficult issues. You have entire libraries at UC Berkeley dedicated to schizophrenia. I mean, like, you could read everything there is. If you can't handle that, then you don't get the contract.
Yeah.
This is not hard.
And
If
you picked the wrong job.
Right. Like, you can't tell me. And that's what they'll say. Well, we have really difficult clients. I know. I have them too, because your
The
clients
same
are my
client.
clients.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so that is what blows me away, is that they're creating these ways to respond in what they say is a better way. But once again, there's no oversight. It doesn't take a lot to say. If you're scared of the clients, then you need to drop that contract. You're getting $1 million for this, and you're scared of the clients?
Wow.
But I'm sitting there with them. Then you need to, that's okay. You couldn't fulfill the contract. Give the money back.
Right.
Let's find someone who
can do it.
So we can help people.
Yeah.
And that's what I see. So it's very specific, but
yeah,
I'd fix that for sure.
You know what's so interesting with this mental health piece too? Like, for lack of a better word, I feel like mental health has become like this sexy buzzword. Like everyone's talking about self-care. Everyone's talking about their mental health. And, like that's something that people are talking about.
Yes.
Finally, which is good because for a long
fantastic.
time, especially like in our communities, like it was an it's like there's a stigma to talk about like, well, I see a therapist, or there's a stigma to admit that you're going through it. You gotta always
That's right.
present
That's right.
your best face and not want anyone to think you're really going through it. But right now we're in a moment where like that's really, people are realizing, no, that's important. We got to talk about our mental health. And here we have a population that is significantly dealing with mental health issues way more than the house population, and yet that stigma has followed them. So even though we've been talking about mental health first, even though we're talking about like don't send the police in, send in mental health practitioners, or have like self-care places and all this, when it comes to unhoused people, that there's a disconnect where it's not sexy to talk about unhoused people's mental health. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's cool for the rest of us to talk about how important our mental health is and to demand those services and make sure that those spaces exist. But when it comes to unhoused people, when clearly that is a demographic that is deeply in need of many kinds of mental health services.
That's right. That's right.
There's nothing. There is zero services for mental health for the unhoused.
And when it comes to individuals who clearly have an issue, clearly, I've seen it where the service providers will get a TRO, a restraining order, against that person because that person will go into psychosis, and they can be difficult. But what happens there then is that person who clearly, like I said, they're talking to different voices, there are things that are clearly happening that are not intentional, right? What you have is a person on the street who is not being fed because they can't go to that person, who's not getting a shower because they can't use, they've been banned. And it might be they're banned not because they're violent, but because they're on loop. Nobody wants to hear the same song. And I've seen that where people are like, you know what, I'm banning you because you just can't get unstuck. And then who takes care of that person? If you're the mental health provider in the city and you don't walk onto the street and find that person, because that person is the one that you really need, that's, and they could go back and talk about Reagan, which they always, Reagan let him out. I heard the Fremont mayor was like, we don't like the ACLU because they sued the mental institutions, and that's why all these mentally ill people are out on the streets. Okay, whatever the reason, folks who are desperate in the United States of America who are sick, and then they'll say, well, if they're that sick, why don't we just arrest them and they can go to care court?
Care court, right.
And I say, isn't arrest a punitive measure?
Right.
They're not committing any crime because maybe Martians are talking to the fillings in their teeth and they're just on loop, right? They're not hurting anyone, but they would need some bread, some pasta,
Some
lunch, water,
a shower.
In the summer when it's hot,
Right.
when it's cold, a
Right.
shower. Where do they go? Where do they go wash their clothes?
Right.
If no one comes and sees them. And those are the people that we help. And so, once again, if I were in charge, I would call all those folks to the carpet who are getting millions because mental health is the sexy word.
Yep.
And we're going to help everybody. We're going to
Yep.
do self-care. But they'll only help as long as it's comfortable.
That part.
Because the hard cases, the ones who really need help, who don't need to be put in jail because they're not, it's not intentional. Who's going to serve them, like you said, water? Breakfast. I know someone who can't go anywhere and will ask people, can you, and they don't know why. but can you bring me an extra plate? Can you? And then everyone gets mad and says, well, they stink. They haven't taken a shower. You know, other folks. Not knowing that they're not allowed any, just because of their mental health disability. And then we say, well, should we institutionalize them? Well, she can take care of herself, but really, if a clinician, an MD, a PhD, you went to school for this, if you sent them out away from their desk, because I've seen it work before. Berkeley used to have that. They had a guy who would go into the encampments who would give that kind of support.
Yeah.
And you would see a change, right? We
Yeah.
all change with, sometimes you can't.
Yep.
But in those cases
Yep.
where they can, why not do that? Because these organizations are getting millions.
Yep. And not doing the work.
And they're not, and it's hard work, and they need to call, like, what, it's easy to sit in the office and have someone who can clearly get there and who has that functioning to take the bus.
Right.
And who can figure it out and who can
Right.
figure out a schedule.
Right.
Right? That's easy. The hard part, if we want to really fix things, we gotta, you gotta do the work.
Yep. Which is why those mobile clinics are so important. And the Alameda County had one mental health mobile clinic that served all of Alameda, and it had one MD in it, one mental.
That's right. That's right.
And I was like, that's crazy. How does one person in one vehicle cover all the mental health issues of all of Alameda County's unhoused? And that didn't last too long. But it didn't last too long because it didn't get the support it needed.
Well, and I don't mean, like, I know I complain, and I'm not trying to, because I really, what I think what's important that leaders don't do is, and it's probably because people really ridicule and criticize them if they admit a problem. What I say is we pull it back and say, this is an issue. How do we fix this? So Macro in Oakland.
Don't get me started.
I like, they
Don't
came
get
and
me
they were so
started.
nice. But they were so nice. And they wanted to do something. And they come and
But what did they do?
But that van was
But what
like
did they do?
shiny and it was wrapped and it said Macro.
And what did they do?
No, this is the thing. If statistics, because the guys who work there just got a job, right? Statistics show that the unhoused population is disproportionately disabled. And you get a van, and your job is to transport, but your van doesn't have a lift, it's not ADA compliant, and we know statistics show us, okay, what's the population that we're serving? More than likely, they're going to be in a wheelchair or a walker. They're going to need help getting on the bus. But you send a bus that's not able to care for the majority of your population. How come no one thought that through? And if they did, we all do it. Take the van back and get a van that has a lift.
Right.
Why do we just look at the problem and go, oh, well, I guess we're going to keep this van for 3 more years and we're not going to pick up anybody? Because what's going to happen is if you can't transport the people that you've been funded to transport, we're going to have to call 911 to get an emergency transport that will have to take the person to the hospital to be assessed, to then get another transport to get that person to where they're going to be. So that you're going to have to pay for and be charged for 2 ambulances when Macro could have just had a lift to put the person up to take them to the shelter.
Wow.
Those are the little things that I think, let's just be honest and fix it, right?
My issue with Macro is just that there was a lot of things overpromised and a lot of stuff underdelivered. Like what I seen happen was, they would come when there was a call. For folks who don't know, Macro is the mental health component that during the whole defund OPD kind of movement, there was this push to create a component that was who would be called upon if it wasn't a criminal or a dangerous situation, where it was something to deal with mental health, because a lot of the cops don't know how to deal with mental health.
Right.
They're just not trained, and they're ready to shoot first.
That's right.
And so Macro was created out of that, and it's housed in the fire department, not an OPD. And they're called and they roam around. They serve any kind of mental health, but a big part of their programming was to serve the encampments. And so they would get called to situations that would happen, but nobody on staff, at least at the time that, you know, I was following what they were doing when the first couple of years that they were around, no one on staff was actually a licensed clinician. So they couldn't like do any real, like they couldn't diagnose people. They couldn't offer the kinds of services people needed. And then they would show up, and if people didn't want the services, they would hand them a bottle of water and a silver Mylar blanket. And that was where it began, and that's where it ended.
Right.
And it was like, what does that do? Like, half the time, things were not de-escalated. It was like they would show up.
Well, yeah, you're right, because they have to meet the 3 criteria for 5150.
Yeah.
So you have to either be homicidal, suicidal with the plan, like with a plan.
Yes.
Or incapacitated. So you're laying on the ground in a ball, you can't move your arms, you can't feed yourself. So a mental health crisis really doesn't fit into that, so they can't do anything. But the macro guys were so nice, I have to say. But I know they
were
got
nice
hired,
guys,
but the person who's deploying this, whoever that is, I think if we're really going to, one, cut back on the deficits that are occurring, because we're spending a lot of money and there's really not a lot of success, right? People are getting back out on the street. I think we as a society, we have to tell people, listen, we are going to be honest and tell people, not like what's going on in the administration, like we're just going to cut everything, but say, okay, we're looking at the statistics. This is how we're going to cut back. This is how we're going to make a plan, and then start to help people, because you're right. You can't send mental health folks out who are not clinicians to deal with some of the most, if they were able to function, they wouldn't be unhoused with no benefits, no contact with family, no understanding on how to even process their psychosis.
Right.
And there's no one out there that's tending to that.
Yeah. It's a damn shame. You know, there's all these gaps.
A lot of gaps.
In the services that are out there. And like you said, millions of dollars are being used and not used in a good way, not being efficiently used, that are in a way that's really helping people. It's just kind of there. People got a job.
It's really hard right
People
now.
got a job.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it ends up. But I just want to thank you for coming today. And I know you're so busy. And so thank you for taking some time out to come
always,
and talk.
you're a warrior. I always support the village. Everything you do,
Thank
Nita.
you.
You're always my shero. And we have to support each other. You know that when the call comes, because we always need backup. We have a lot of fights, and we have a lot of people to help.
Yes.
So, and I'm just so grateful for you, because you're always out there feeding everybody, like good food, hot food, with your daughter and your team. That's the difference. You know, you could tell by the love. When people come out, you come out, y'all are frying fresh lumpia, you're serving the folks a lot of food. The biggest pots I've ever seen are empty after you've shown up. They'll be full to the top. And so I'll always, whenever you need me, I'll be there.
I appreciate that. Same to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
You. Love you.
Thank you for joining us. And thank you guys for joining us. And we will be back next week for Word on the Curb. We're out. Thank you so much.